In August 1962, 50 teenage musicians, including me, a percussionist, walked up the gangway of a ferry sailing from Dover to the Hook of Holland. It was the first stage of a long journey the Essex Youth Orchestra was taking to West Germany. In fact, to West Berlin. Some of us were apprehensive about the political tensions in the city, others about how our concerts would be received. But almost everyone was far more worried about being seasick. We had been surprised that the Essex County Council had allowed us to play in Berlin at all. Indeed, we did not know for certain that we'd be off until the day before we sailed. But sail we did, and the whole orchestra helped to pass the 6-hour crossing by crowding onto the lower deck with a peculiar combination of instruments, including a French horn, a trumpet, a cello, and a triangle, to hold what we always called a session. Before long, the deck was full of people laughing, singing, and dancing to our improvised music. By the time we reached Holland, only one person had felt vaguely seasick, one of the two double bassists, and, would you believe it, the boy. But the train journey across land towards Germany was terrible. Tightly packed into very uncomfortable compartments, people slept on the floor, luggage racks, and each other. That, however, wasn't the worst of it. Just as we were able to drift off, the lights would be snapped on and blaze away, while a voice would shout, "Passports, please!" On one interruption to our slumbers, I awoke and found myself staring down the muzzle of a machine gun. It was held menacingly by a huge woman dressed in a manner that would do a Girl Guide credit. East Germany already, I thought, and without any hesitation whatsoever, offered the terrifying sight my passport. We arrived in West Berlin at 8:30 in the morning, tired out but somewhat refreshed by what we saw. The city looked astonishingly modern. Wide, clean roads, flowers in every window, avenues of trees down the middle of every street, and the main shopping centre was bright and alive, although, as we later discovered, very expensive. At our hostel, fully booked to cater for the whole orchestra, we were fed with hard-boiled eggs and thick black German bread, a monotonous breakfast diet we came to know very well. Our main object, apart from giving concerts, was to see as much of the city as possible in the short time available. For this purpose we had been provided with a young American guide and his German friend. On the second day they took us for a tour around West Berlin, that is, a tour around the famous wall, or should I say, the infamous wall. After many warnings about tear gas, about bullets, about being kidnapped by green-coated policemen dragging us into the eastern sector, we arrived at a barbed wire section of the barrier and spotted, about 30 yards away on the other side, a long trench. Although our guides assured us that it was full of East German soldiers, no amount of whistling and catcalling would induce a single communist soldier to pop his head over the top. After that, and feeling sprightly, we walked for a fair distance along the side of the border until we came across a sentry box overlooking the wall. The guard was eventually persuaded to allow us to climb up into the box and peer into the east. But disappointment. A large grey board had been erected to prevent curious visitors from seeing what the streets in East Berlin actually looked like. However, much to our delight, a communist policeman, crouching under the board, flashed a sizable mirror directly into our faces to stop us taking photographs. Our trumpet player, treating this as a great game, took out his pocket mirror, then reflected the sun back at the policeman. After surprised smiles all round, west and east, we continued on our tour and, of course, the 6 concerts that we were scheduled to give over the next few days. These were well attended, and we were gratified that a large number of young Germans came to hear us. In England, only a handful of our contemporaries ever bothered to turn out for our music. But at the first performance in Berlin, we received huge applause, even between movements, which was a bit off-putting. and while a stout German gentleman presented every girl in the orchestra with a bunch of flowers, the audience continued applauding enthusiastically. They must have clapped for at least 10 minutes, so I couldn't help imagining their sore hands when they eventually got home. The days vanished in visits to jazz clubs, receptions, garden parties, and, once, many of us sneaked out of the hostel for a late-night boating expedition. This event was accompanied by a youth orchestra chorus, a harmonized version of John Brown's Body, echoing beautifully over the waters. But nearly everyone had one particular aim: to get into East Berlin. After being warned by our guides, who refused to come with us, that we had a 50-50 chance of returning unmolested, we, assuming they were joking, split into groups of 5 or 6, then separately made our way to Checkpoint Charlie, symbol of the division between the east part of the city and the west. The American police cheerfully waved us through to the world-famous red and white barrier. This was raised by the East German police, who saluted us, grimaced slightly on seeing our passports, then directed us to a hut just on the other side of the wall. Here we waited for half an hour while our passports were thoroughly examined, page by page, and we were subject to gruff questions about how many West German marks and how many English pounds we had brought with us, and other personal matters. My friend, a bassoonist, and I had devised what we thought would be an amusing plan. We had each wrapped up a banana in brown paper and put it into our top pockets in the hope that a guard would ask, "What is that?" Whereupon we would have had great pleasure in slowly unwrapping the fruit and holding it up before the guard's astonished eyes. But sadly, no curiosity was raised, and we ate the bananas together after being let loose into East Berlin. While walking on communist soil, we looked out for the half-starved, badly dressed people we had heard so much about. But of these we saw nothing. The shops were drab, certainly, but not as bad as we had been led to believe. Perhaps this was because we were walking down the only streets the East Germans wanted us to see. But who can tell? We did not have time to penetrate East Berlin very far. Time enough, though, for the bassoonist and I to try another pre-planned experiment. This one to see how badly the post was censored. We wrote 2 postcards to a friend we both knew in England. On one postcard we wrote that East Berlin was not so bad after all, and the people looked happy. On the other, we said the police were watching everything we did, the people looked miserable, and it was raining heavily. A lie. We even ended the message on the second postcard with a sentence in large letters: "It's horrible." Unfortunately, we later heard that both postcards arrived safely, and on the same day, so we had nothing at all to grumble about. Then, before we had arrived, it seemed, our tour was over and we had to leave. On our last night, after a spectacular supper in the station restaurant, we wandered onto the platform with half an hour to wait for the train to begin our long journey home. What better way could we, an orchestra, say goodbye and repay a city which had treated us so well than by giving it a gift of our music? So, with midnight approaching and the last trains pulling up to rest in their sidings, the whole orchestra harmonized traditional English folk songs, at the same time remembering and reflecting on the people of Berlin, west and east, who we were leaving behind, perhaps forever,